The Silly Goose Gang Podcast.
And we are back, episode 31, Silly Goose Gang Podcast, continuing our unofficial Shark Week. And we're joined tonight by Jeremiah Sullivan from Shark Armour, all the way from San Diego. So, Jeremiah, thank you very much for joining us this evening, or this afternoon in your case.
It is. It's a great pleasure to be here, gents.
Yeah, it's. I have to say, Jeremiah, right from the get-go, this is a wonderful beard and hair combo you have going on. You're very much the surfer. It's a fine look you have.
You know, the beard comes and goes through the years. Oh God, since I was young and running around remote parts of the world, I sometimes would be at sea for months or a half a year, and I started growing beards back then, and then I didn't wear them for many years because of a lot of the television that I was doing, trying to maintain some consistency. But I figure at this stage of the game, hell, man, I can do whatever the hell I want, which is exactly what I did.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
That right, definitely earned that right.
So it's looking through some notes today, Jeremiah. It looks like sharks have been a lifelong obsession for you.
Well, I grew up in the tropics. I don't know that they're an obsession, but they were a constant companion for the most part. Having grown up in the tropics and spent a lot of my life roaming around various parts of the open water, the open sea, and I was fortunate to be able to spend a lot of time there. And of course, particularly in my lifetime, over the past, I'm 66 now, so for 50 years I'm out running around. And if you go by that far, if you go back that far, we had a lot more sharks around. So sadly, during my lifetime, these 50 plus years in the sea, I've seen such a degradation and a loss of these critical members of the marine ecosystem that it's a real tragedy, that more people aren't, tuned in to more accurate, relevant, and informed information about sharks and fishing and all that. Because as you know, we have the commercial fishing fleets all over the planet. You guys have yours, everybody has theirs, and on occasion, the fishing lobby tends to hold sway over the conservation people, and you start destroying, your sustainable yields from your own domestic populations of any species of food fish, then you're doing nothing but shooting yourself in the foot. And that's happened at an accelerated rate worldwide now. Oh gosh, primarily over the past 20, 25, 30 years, which is terribly sad to see. But fortunately, there's still quite a few out. A lot of people are getting tuned in, so to speak, in the conservation value of animals like this. And what started out with me is just a few people that were, interested in sharks and shark behavior and the kind of thing that I was doing, has now become a global movement. And you've got about $1 billion a year shark diving industry that's been developed out of the success and the safety of the access to swimming in the open water with sharks like this by using my suits, the shark suits that I've been building for the last 40 some odd years. It's been a great adventure.
Yeah, it sounds like it'd be a great adventure. When you talk about the like the fish, the decline in the population, is this a fishing thing, or is this a climate thing primarily?
Well, I think initially on the front end it's the fishing thing. We've got a lot of problems right now with shark finning. You've probably heard of this behavior. Unfortunately, it's from some of the countries out in the Pacific. China, for instance, some of the other Asian countries still do this, unfortunately, because what they're doing is they're capturing these vital members. It's like taking a pillar out from under a tall building and expecting everything to be fine. You just can't do that and expect not to have problems as a result. So they're destroying these animals, just cutting their fins off, throwing the animals back in the sea to die a miserable death, sink to the bottom or otherwise. And I find that stunningly unconscionable. But then again, our species, our version of animals in the ecosystem, being humans, have been perhaps less generous, with that kind of thinking. And the sooner we get there, the better off we'll all be.
Yeah, I think finning's one of those practices where, taking everything aside, farming, fishing, it just seems so wasteful because they are literally they're not using any other part of the animal. At least if they were using the whole animal, okay, they're still taking them out, but at least, they literally just cut the fins off. And as you say, just dump the rest of it. It's such a wasteful practice.
Yeah, and that's the one. Those are the ones that are targeting the sharks. And for instance, you know about the Galapagos Islands, spectacular place. I spent a lot of time there in the 80s or 70s or 80s. Might have been the 70s. This was way early. This was before it became Ecuador took over as a national park and all that sort of business. And it's an extraordinary natural history environment, as you know. And now areas like that are being targeted heavily by these industrial scale fishing operations from primarily China that are going into, and I'm not bagging on China, I'm just saying, God, man, you have got to get a grip on this because it's unsustainable. And the way some people will eat every freaking living thing, that they can catch, that's not necessarily, an appropriate way to go forward. I mean, this is 2020, and it's time to start thinking differently on this little blue marble because we're filling it up and we're taking away everything that sustains our ability to exist here. So it's kind of a sort of a fool's errand, if you will. But the exploitation aspect of it is brutal. So you've got those that are targeting just the sharks with long lines and all this sort of thing. And around the Galapagos Islands, there are something like 100 commercial boats that were starting to move in again, as they have been for years now, come in and they were actually going into the national park waters and just raping the marine life there. Well, then the Galapagos will get wind of that, the government there, and they'll say, no, out of our territorial waters. So the next plan is for those same fishing industries and these gigantic industrial boats to put a giant ring all the way around those islands so that all of those migratory routes that every year or seasonally these animals move into and out of that part of the ocean, they're catching them there instead of driving all the way into the islands to pull them out. So it's a staggeringly painful and destructive thing to see going on. And hopefully people will wake up before it's too late.
Do you have sorry, Ali, do you have a number in terms of the decline of sharks in terms of like percentages? Is it 60% of what it was in the 70s, or what kind of numbers are you talking about, Jeremiah?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you from my personal observations here in the 80s in San Diego, when I was at Scripps Institution of Oceanography, when I was studying shark behavior and all that, the human-shark interaction is sort of my specialty, and how to avoid having bad interactions that way. And back when I was in school there, you could literally see finning across the top of the surface on a glassy day a couple of hundred shark fins, just within 500 yards of shore. Now you see nothing. Where we used to have a shark diving capability here in San Diego, people would go out and we'd chum them up and you'd be able to see them and swim with them. Now it's extremely difficult to find them at all. So in my direct experience, I've seen a massive degradation in the volume of species. And I'm not just talking San Diego, but globally, unless they're being heavily protected and responsibly so. So the numbers on this are that 90% of the large fish are already gone from the sea. We've killed them. We've wiped them frickin' out. 90% of the big fish. Every bluefin tuna that was caught and monitored here in the Pacific after Fukushima is radioactive. They pick up the radioisotopes on every frickin' fish that's caught out here in the Pacific. And if you look at a satellite image that covers all of this stuff, you can see how the plume traveled from down off Japan and with the currents, the annual and cyclical currents that move around, it spreads that kind of toxicity everywhere. So this is where a lot of these environmental pressures and strains that you had mentioned a moment ago come in and they give you the second barrel. It's like two smoking barrels, man. You got one up front from the guys that are killing them unnecessarily for fantasy, a health supplement of some kind. And then you've got the rest of them that are coming in and destroying them from all these other environmental issues, like toxicity, like the global warming and all this sort of thing. The critical thing to understand about global warming isn't that it's just getting warmer and it's a little inconvenient, we sweat a little bit more. The problem is that once that starts happening, it's like a domino effect. And every single little segment of an ecosystem, your environment, everything around you, from the bugs to the birds and the bees and everything else, is affected one way or another. If you think about the ocean, let's focus on that for a second, as a finely tuned machine like a Ferrari. It works best when it's properly maintained and safeguarded. You don't just give it to a kid and say, go have fun. You got to take care of things if you expect them to be functional in the same manner. And while there's been a significant trend toward conservation and all those things, it's never going to be enough at the rate that we are destroying and exploiting things unnecessarily, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I'd actually just seen this morning, just doubling back a little bit, Jeremiah, on the Chinese factory ships in Galapagos. Andy Torbett, Chris, who's previously been on the podcast, shared a picture, and it was from a fisherman that was working on behalf of the Galapagos, and he'd been out, and it was literally the horizon. It looked like there was a city with the amount of lights strung across the entire width of the horizon, as far as someone could see with the camera. And it looked like a cityscape with the amount of lights in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. And it's all ships. It's just ships with massive nets or long lines, as you say, just
all fishing.
Hammering it.
Hammering them. And these long lines are indiscriminate. So they're not just killing the sharks that die a miserable death. They're killing anything that happens to swim by and pick up that hook. So they're killing a lot of species, these shark fishermen, that don't want that species. So again, it goes over the side as bycatch or something else. Frankly, the Chinese are probably taking that protein and consuming it in some way or another, because they tend to leave little aside from the shark's torsos. Most food things they'll still consume. But yeah, it's just stunning how this happens. I first became aware of the perils of these kinds of factory ships and things of that nature, that kind of industrial fishing. And remember, these are exploitive markets. These are, it's like the oil industry, oil and gas, and some of these other things, timber. All they do is take from nature, for the most part, and exploit things that were here and belong, frankly, to everyone. And by doing that, they're not doing and replacing a damn thing. They're just taking it out like gold or silver or something else, walking away and leaving their mess behind, as though out of sight, out of mind. We did that over there. It's got nothing to do with us. It's not a problem here. We're just going to make something pretty out of the metal we took out of their ground and destroyed their land. It's not unlike what they did to the indigenous Americans here, when they came in and took our land in this country.
Yeah.
This is
that out of sight, out of mind thing plays an element with the fishing, because people don't see the fish until they're on a fishmonger's counter or in the supermarket. So you don't really, as Chris was saying, how low has it gone down, because you don't see it. We're used to seeing on the telly or on nature documentaries, the plains of Serengeti, or the lions chasing the gazelles, and whereas you don't really see the fact. Does that make sense? It almost is out of sight, out of mind. We don't really worry about it.
Yeah.
The people. What I was going to say, Jeremiah, was just this is why it's really important to talk to specialists in sort of every field, because you get on the 6 o'clock news, maybe a 30-second snippet about sharks. Oh, sharks they're declining in population, and anyway on sport, and then you don't. That's it. So without speaking to guys like you, we would never know this stuff at all, because it's not out there, for general consumption.
You can find this kind of information. You're correct that it's not presented in the mass media in that way, but please put some links up and things of that nature that encourage people to take a look. And you can find it all online now, and through the various conservation organizations that are out there working, so that people can get a sense of that. If you were on a boat that was doing this kind of fishing, you would see things like people pulling these sharks up over the side off these long lines that can go for miles. They'd have turtles, they'd have all kinds of non-targeted species, etc. If they're not targeted, they're over the side. If it's sharks, they cut the fins off, they throw them over the side. In order to throw them over the side, they might take a stick with a nail in it and hammer them in the head with it and then drag them over so it's easier for them to throw them out the scupper, right? Well, there's an enormous amount of this kind of utter madness. And there are people that clandestinely record this kind of thing. In Asia, and particularly in the South, what they're calling the South China Sea now, all of those Southern Asian countries, the Chinese are coming in there and playing hell on things. They're moving into the islands that are claimed by Vietnam and Malaysia and a lot of these other places, and they're claiming them for themselves to make the military, right? And or exploiting all of the marine resources that are edible out of them beforehand, like the tridacna clams, the giant clams. They're going in and throwing in explosives and blowing things up just to pull these clams out, and they're destroying the sustainable functionality of these large marine areas that sustain several countries. Doesn't matter. This is our mine. This seems to be the mentality, that's going on there. But there's also a number of cases that I've been hearing about where if the Chinese or I hate to use the term Chinese all the time, but unfortunately they are one of the, if not the largest. So you have these countries when these commercial fishing industries come in, maybe they make some kind of a deal that somebody gets a handful of cash and they let them exploit their waters for a while. Unfortunately, because they're so good at doing what they're doing, they're going to Africa and various places, giving some dictator some money. He comes in and removes the viability of the fish populations that have sustained that country and its people since the beginning of time. And now they're being decimated so that soon there'll be even more massive crises of available protein to indigenous cultures anywhere that are attached to the sea and tend to survive off of it. Mm. But there are I know reports of observers which are placed on these boats by the countries in the areas that these guys want to come in and fish, and these guys they're disappearing. One or two or three, something happened. Where'd he go? I don't know. Lately, fell off. Something happened. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So the police guys are supposed to be keeping an eye on things are persona non grata. They're disposed of, and they're catching these pirate fishing boats all over the place, not just the Galapagos, but freaking everywhere. It's nightmare.
And I know. I had watched. Ironically, it was the Grand Tour. It was a car show, which was previously the guys from Top Gear in the UK, Jeremy Clarkson. Yeah. So they had a new show, and they had done a show when they were in Cambodia into Vietnam, and they were using boats. And when they were going down the Mekong Delta, they were saying, like 60 million people require the Mekong Delta for fish, and if they mess that up, it's worse than like nuclear war to those people. That's how many people depend on that for their life. So, I think again, China had been damming certain parts of the river that come off it, and it was lower. It was really messing it up, and they were trying to make the point of, we cannot mess this up because for the locals, Cambodians and the Vietnamese, it's so critical for their survival. And they've got their ways to fish it sustainably. And kind of China coming in and damming it and kind of really messing it up. So, it's a matter of there are those that create and share and those that take and destroy, and that's what seems to be going on, particularly in our country right now. We got a cultural battle going on here, not just between political perspectives, but people that actually understand that if we're going to continue to live on this planet, you can't just incinerate it for a quick buck. A quick buck means jack nothing. You can't eat money. These are the words of some of our great indigenous leaders here.
when the white man realizes that he's destroyed everything, and he sees only a pile of money there, he can't eat that money. It just doesn't work. So, it's a sad situation, but hope springs eternal that enough people globally will get wind of this. It's like your big fish in the Mediterranean. You guys over in Europe, you lost almost all your big tuna, your giant tuna. Everything gets wiped out. People go to the Mediterranean, they go, where's all the fish, man? You don't see a lot over there because of all the exploitation. You got to find a way to survive.
Yeah, we've had it since my dad was in the Royal Navy for 22 years, and a large portion of his career he was with the Fishery Protection Fleet because of the cod and the herring that was getting taken at the time by the Icelandic fleet, and the Spanish fleets were coming in with the start of the big factory boats, and we had the smaller British trawlers that just could not compete. And the Navy, the Royal Navy, actually created the Fishery Protection Fleet for that very reason, to put a military presence out to protect the fishing grounds and to try and maintain the cod stocks up in the Greenland, Iceland, UK gap, up the far north heading towards the Arctic Ocean almost. Because otherwise it would have been, and at one point it was almost a fighting war between Britain and Iceland over fish, which it sounds crazy, but as you say, so many people rely on it for not just food but for income and everything else, that it's that continual battle, isn't it, between sustainability but a viable industry whilst also not destroying the planet. It's a delicate balance.
Yeah, that and the human condition of believing that you must maintain ancient cultural this or that. Oh, we used to hunt whales for, that was, I remember my granddad did it. I want to do it too. Bullshit. What's happening up in Iceland, the Azores, and all, some of these other spots in the Faroe Islands.
Islands, yeah.
I spent a lot of time in the Antarctic, and man, the wildlife that we could see down there. This is before it became a big tourist destination. And of course, then the Chinese are coming in or not the Chinese, but the Japanese in this case, coming in and wanting to harvest all these whales and killing the dolphins, man, over in Taiji and these places. It's like, guys, there's no room for this kind of cultural nonsense in a planet that is shrinking before your very eyes. It's important to change, to be able to adapt. This is Darwin's big deal, right? You either adapt or you die. And if you can't change ahead of the curve, you're going to be scrambling, dog paddling for survivability. And unfortunately, industries, certainly in my country, here in the United States, they tend to want to exploit every last cent that could come out of anything that somebody invested in, like oil, the old fossil fuels and all that sort of thing, as opposed to shifting toward sustainable energy, which is the only survivability, energy source that we're going to have here, as far as I'm concerned, at least one that's sustainable. And no, it's a freaking hot mess. People tend to cling to what happened before as opposed to being innovative, being adaptive, being a good evolutionary partner on this planet, along with the rest of the critters.
Yeah, I know. You mentioned the Faroe Islands in there. And I know they're real bad for shark fin soup. Real bad. There's always pictures. I think maybe later on towards the year, it's like the season where they do it and they just cut the fins off and.
Yeah, it's actually this week. They've just done it this week or last week.
This week?
Yeah, they drive all the porpoises, sharks, dolphins, and it just, I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of it, Jeremiah, but they chase them into what at the time used to be a natural harbour, over time has been built into a full functioning harbour, and just literally club them. And as you say, they do it under that culture / tradition / whatever phrase you want to put aside it that makes it seem politically correct. But and again, they're not even using it for food, for oil, for fuel. They're just, as far as I can see and everything I've read, are just slaughtering them because it's the tradition on the Midsummer Festival, at the end of the Midsummer Festival.
It's stunning to me. I don't know how any living thing can grow up with such a simple and shallow vision and not see more of what's going on. But I think that conservation, frankly, is a luxury. It's a luxury for countries and people that aren't first preoccupied with survival. And in many places, people are preoccupied with survival. They're the ones that get hammered the hardest and first. When the wealthier countries with greater capabilities exploit what little resources they have for greedy purposes, rather than trying to support a more balanced and healthy approach. But that whole Pharaoh's murder scene there is just brutal and painful to see. Up in the northern Pacific, we have the indigenous cultures up there that still claim culturally that they should be able to take 1 or 2 whales or something like this, per year per little village or something like that. And now that's sustainable. That's all those other resources that you use every bit of that material and that meat. Other places like in the fair, maybe they might be eating some of that stuff, but there's no need or reason to do that. In the case of sharks have very high mercury levels in their bodies. Normally, the larger fish, particularly the pelagic ones that swim around, big tuna and all that sort of thing, they swim around and they eat up all the smaller stuff in their world, the niche that they live in. And as a result, they're compounding the amount of some of these toxic materials that exist in their meat. And people just don't seem to get it, that sharks are flat out, at least all the ones I've heard about being tested, are way over the threshold of what you're supposed to consume at any time. They're massively beyond. This is the healthy levels of mercury exposure that humans should have. Yet they still do it. They still eat some of them eat the meat, some of them turn into fish and chips. The smooth hound, it's one of the smaller, non-dangerous species of sharks. They capture them in massive numbers with bottom trawlers and all this kind of stuff, and massively destructive. And sell it as some other kind of fish. You're eating mercury. Mercury.
You used to be able to get it, and I don't know if you still can, but they used to call it in Britain, and certainly up on the west coast of Scotland, they used to call it rock salmon because they didn't want to use dogfish or smooth shark or whatever species it was. So they would call it rock salmon because it was found on the rocks. And obviously everyone in Scotland, Scotland's famous for salmon and fly fishing and, the salmon leaping out the water. So rock salmon, it doesn't sound as bad as dogfish or smooth shark. Smooth shark and chips. No thanks. Rock salmon, that sounds delicious. Thank you very much.
They do it around the world, and again, sadly, it's more about, at least the smaller countries, the less fortunate ones that don't have all these other diverse sources of income and sustenance and nutrition. It really is it's a luxury to be able to say, no, we don't want to destroy all that. We want to protect that for our kids and their kids and their kids. Well, if you're sitting there and you got a village of a dozen people and there's absolutely nothing to eat but what's in that water out there and there's nothing else nearby, that is your life. So we can't be beating we don't want to beat on guys that are actually living the way they always have, but you definitely do not want an increased level of exploitation. Say these fishermen or these industrial people come in and encourage them to kill more and more and more so that they can sell it to these guys for a penny, and then they're selling it for $100 over here. So all of that wealth and money continues to evade the people that maintain, protect, and have nurtured that fishery. And now, again, it's being exploited as badly as the industrial ships coming in.
This sort of reminds me, being at school and learning about, when the Europeans came to Northern America, and the natives would, when they killed a buffalo, they would use every single part of the animal, whereas the Europeans would come, kill them, take the hide off, and make clothes and a blanket, and then leave the animal to rot. It's just completely wasteful and dumb. Essentially, it's just so stupid.
Well, when I was young, we used to spend some time in Africa, and sort of like the tail end of the colonial period, I guess you could say, and back in the 60s and on, and the late 60s, and it was the same then. If any game that was taken, everything was consumed. Everything. There was a difference. There used to be hunters. Now there are killers. In my view, there's no need, no reason, no excuse to be out, trophy hunting and all that sort of nonsense, killing these beautiful creatures, We're running out of animals. I mean, you see it every day. We lose more and more species. So why would anybody, find that attractive or interesting? Not that I don't appreciate the primitive life. I've lived that way a lot, but I don't see any need for people to behave in manners that don't serve the well-being of both humanitarian and environmental causes. Simple as that.
Thankfully, there's people like you in every field regarding animals and the planet. So we need more Jeremiahs out there all across the world to look after all these things.
It's the young ones that blow my mind. There's so many fantastic young conservation people now, and educators. They're absolutely phenomenal and brilliant, and so much more energetic than an old carcass like I am at this stage of the game. But I love to engage with them, and I love to see the momentum, and I'm delighted that there are so many powerful, magnificent young kids that are picking up the banner, and they're fearless of anybody or anything. So I think we have a chance if we can just get the older fools out of the way and let the young folks step up and do what they do best, and that's to be good.
Yeah.
Talking about your old carcass there, which definitely isn't the case. You do, and I'm not just saying this because you're on the podcast. You look tremendous for. Did you say 66?
66, yeah.
You're looking tremendous for 66.
You look like the Lost Beach Boy, Jeremiah. That's what you look like. You look like you might be a Dennis's long lost cousin or something. That's what you look like. You could have been in the Beach Boys.
That was my that was my life. That was my music.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I grew up
out there running around in the ocean. That was my thing.
when we grew up, when we were kids, my mum and dad had an old Volkswagen, and my dad was a massive Beach Boys fan. So I grew up listening to the Beach Boys. So I suppose any young people listening will not know what the Beach Boys are, but they were a fantastic band. So
that period of time, was just so magical. Surf and the whole thing, the golden summers, spectacular.
But different. I surfed in Scotland, so a little bit different to the surf that you would have had in the tropics in the west coast of America. We were very much dry suits because of the water temperature for most of the year.
Look, man, I've always been impressed when the young guys, because I used to spend time in Antarctica and those places, and I always had a surfboard on the ships with me. In the polar regions, I did not have an interest in trying to find a wave to ride, but I use them in the tropics. However, I've been blown away to see how a lot of you guys that live up in those northern climates, Ireland and elsewhere, are loading up with all that rubber, jumping in the water and having a blast, man. I'm just like, holy crap, man.
There's a documentary on Netflix, Jeremiah. I don't know if you've seen it. It's called Under an Arctic Sky, and it's some American guys. They have Icelandic friends, and there's some real remote part of northern Iceland, which is really not easy to get to. They eventually get to ride these waves that apparently are incredible. I mean, they eventually find it, it's a whole story, and they get there and they're riding these waves, but under the Northern Lights, and it's amazing. You watch it and you just go, fuck, I want to be like that. I want to be that cool.
I think I saw a clip of that. Yeah, I think I might have seen a clip of that with the lights up there.
Amazing. It just looks so cool. It's, I've said to Ali recently, I would like to learn to surf, but, as you get older, it's time is the issue. But yeah, that's something that's on my list of things to learn, is to surf. It just looks such a nice freedom, and being out there is such a cool thing to do, I think so.
You can there's no age limit, as long as you keep your parts functional, then you're good to go. I've got my right shoulder's giving me a lot of trouble these days, so I'm trying to get that fixed, and once that's done, then I expect I should be back in the game. I'm a longboarder now. I don't play around with the shawl boards anymore.
I always had a longboard. Even when I was 18, I had a 9'2" red and white candy stripe Malibu with a 1.5-inch mahogany noseboard.
There you go. That's right. That's the best fun, man. That is
proper
the
old
thing
school
you're gonna have.
longboard. Yeah, because it worked well for on the east coast of Scotland. Obviously, we don't have like a massive amount of reef breaks. It tended to be sandbar breaks, so they had those not massively high but long waves that worked beautifully with the longboard. 2 or 3 foot swell, but the wave would roll for 30, 40, 50 seconds, and
Yeah.
you could just sit on your longboard and just run with it. It was brilliant.
Yeah, then nowadays the kids they're shredders. You know what I mean? They're all very aggressive and all kind of hopped up. And my style and early surfing style was long waves. It's like skiing on long skis instead of the short skis. And it's just a long, beautiful, stylish, fun lifestyle, and a great way to grow up, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
One of
Right,
the
I think
things-
we're sorry, Ali.
I was just going to say to Jeremiah, one of the things, and I realised this after I started following you on Instagram, and I feel like I owe you an apology, because I've been like most kids growing up, become a fan of sharks at a very young age. And I remember seeing a documentary, and I think it must have been the late 80s, maybe early 90s. And it was Ron and Valerie Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
You're in your shark suit. And I have, up until literally probably 18 months or so ago, I always thought it was Ron and Valerie Taylor that had created it. Because it was always, every time I saw it was them. So I apologise for thinking nearly my entire life that the shark suit, the shark armour, the galvanic steel suit was actually your invention.
Well, Ron and Val were friends of mine. We were partnered up in the very beginning of the shark suits. Ron, Val, and I were close friends. We traveled around different parts of the world and doing diving and doing that sort of thing. And I actually lived with them in Sydney for a year at one point back in about 1980-ish. And as a young marine biologist, they were mentors of mine, Ron and Val. And so I was discussing my intentions and plans and so on with them through the years back then. And they believed in what I was talking about. And Ron had actually said at one point, yeah, I like that idea. I thought about something like that myself about 13 years ago when he saw oyster shucker's glove, because I had come across some science that suggested sharks would not like the galvanic currents created by metal in seawater. So I'm thinking about, okay, how can I make something that's wearable, that's made out of metal? I couldn't find any material at that point aside from the old mail that you could find in museums, which was extremely heavy, had large interior diameter rings, so it wouldn't help with shark's teeth. It would probably stop the problem, but it wasn't optimized, for what it was that I needed. And so I started literally working with old armor parts in the beginning. And at dinner with Ron and Val one night, I brought this thing up, and Ron says, I know where you can get something like that, where you can get some material. And that's when he said, some years ago, I saw this glove, and perhaps that would be strong enough. So then I started working on that kind of material. I sourced it out, ended up being able to encourage the people that were making it for me at the time, the raw material, to increase the durability and strength of the material that they had while shrinking the interior diameter to prevent the teeth tips from the lower jaw from getting through. Because the bottom jaw teeth on sharks are generally narrow and spiky on most species. The top teeth are usually the more serrated and triangular ones, so that they have the cutting power. So these hook in, and then it comes down, and they take off chunks. Well, I ended up accomplishing that. Ron and Val were only involved, I think, in a couple of those early discussions, and we did a few shots, a little bit of film work. But interestingly, when all that was going down, I had had many inquiries to want to do TV programs and all that. But I had made a deal with Ron and Val for their support and help in me making the first suit or two, that they would have the chance to make the first film about the suit's development. Well, so I'm sitting on my hands with all these people wanting to come and do TV programs with me. And I'm saying, no, I can't do that. I've got to, as soon as my friends get done with theirs, then I'll be happy to do that with you. But not until then. And they're all trying to get me to burn my friends, and they'll never know. But I'm like, no, you don't. I'm not that kind of person. And in the end, it was taking years for that little film project that Ron and Val wanted to do to finish. And I finally, on one of the television programs that we were working on, I pinned them down and said, "Look, I need a date when I can free myself up and start, pulling my business together here." And once that time came, boom, I was, within days, I was off doing television programs. The problem was during that 3-year period, they were promoting the suits and so on, and kind of trying to make that connection in a way that a lot of people were confused by that. But they were definitely at the very beginning of it, and rightly so. They're fabulous people. Ron's gone now, but Val's still alive, and she's still diving. Spectacular woman.
That's pretty cool. It's really cool when you
it's been a wild ride. It's been over 40 years now that I've been building those suits, and it's not just the old chainmail, but the old steel mesh is this kind of stuff here. It's like what you would imagine, the old armor to be, but finer. It's more like a lingerie version of what the guys in the Dark Ages were wearing. And I started with stainless, and started doing some other things out of titanium for some special clients that the military and so on, who have restrictions for having magnetic objects around them, etc. Then I had inquiries from a lot of my friends in the special operations side, from the military, the DOD, and the law enforcement, and so on, that were asking me in the beginning of the wars in the Middle East that were going on, at least that we were participating in, about what's been 30 years now or so, 20, 30 years. These guys were all saying, "Hey, man, we're getting all chewed up over here. You're extending survivability in lethal environments in your world. How about helping your friends out?" And because my entire experience in life has been out in remote parts of the world, living, a perilous existence to some extent, there was a great similarity there, and they could see that, and they encouraged me to start working towards non-metallic materials that could be used to protect not just the divers and when I'm doing my bit, but also people in other environments, terrestrial, wherever they happen to be and whatever they happen to be doing. So the evolution has been extremely interesting. And at this stage of the game, we have literally reset the threshold for protective textiles and materials globally over the past, recent years. And that's been the changes are coming in the same way that my suits, the shark suits and shark armor has changed the diving industry in its way. These other solutions, these advanced protective technologies I'm developing, are changing the face of personal protection in all kinds of environments out in the world.
That's super cool. So has your suit, the ideas and the suits themselves, have they changed as the science has improved the raw materials? So as like you say, titanium has become sort of available. And has that constantly been an evolution of the suit as things become more available and stuff? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I'm always even back in 1980 when I was first starting to build these. I started the project in 1978 when I was a student. That's when I was studying all the sensory systems of sharks, and I stumbled on these papers that suggested that sharks did not like that galvanic current created by metal in seawater. That was the beginning. It turned out to be a somewhat inaccurate assessment, but I had a two-stage approach there. I had the theoretical opportunity that sharks would not want near metals, these galvanic currents in seawater, rusting metal or whatever it happens to be. But at the same time, I had a physical barrier. It turns out that the theory was useless because it varies depending on what species you're talking about. The smaller species, like a smooth dogfish up in your neck of the woods, some studies were done where they put little blindfolds on these sharks that were in a big tank. They couldn't see, but their sensory systems were all there. And sharks have, three primary sensory systems and use a couple of others. You've got the electroreception, you've got, hearing or sound, vibration, you got vision, you got smell and taste. And the electroreception of sharks happens to be the most sensitive in the animal kingdom. As a result, the same way if you chewed on some aluminum foil, it gets on your one of your fillings, it's got that weird feeling. Well, there's something going on there that affects them. And this thing called tonic immobility, which is basically a shark kind of going into a short circuit phase or stage, not difficult or painful or anything like that, but it's just it alters them. It's like us, in some peculiar state that is accentuated with the galvanic currents, right? So the galvanic currents assist in those tonic immobility behavior displays. However, going back to that small shark, to make this story complete here, they blindfold the shark. They introduce into the salt water there piece of wood. Shark stays where he is, nothing happens. Piece of glass, nothing happens. A rusting wire, boom, the shark tries to swim away from the proximity of that wire. Ooh, he can't see it. He probably doesn't smell anything here, but his sensory system, his electroreception has picked this up. Anything that has a greater galvanic current than your own, because every living thing has, an electrical field around it, would be considered what? Predator. Can't see, but there's something bigger near you that you can't see, and you don't want to be around. You don't want to be food, so you escape, right? So there are all these layers of spectacularly refined evolutionary survival techniques and tactics that literally every living thing has established over since the beginning of time. And that, again, is going back to our earlier conversation, is how and why it gets so complicated and complex with the synergistic dramas that occur between each of these changes that we make in a perfect system. Nature's pretty damn good at what it does. It's better than anything anybody else has been able to come up with, right? Yet we continue to think in our arrogance as the vertical, primate, that we'd be better at that than anybody else. But example, that small shark we were talking about, a small species would be intimidated by a galvanic current. As I learned through those many, many years of running these kinds of tests and studies, you go all the way up to the biggest species, the white shark. What is he going to be afraid of? Not much. Maybe anything with a galvanic current to a white shark could be considered prey. Ooh, that's probably good. So now I'm thinking, oh, geez, great. Now I thought I've been building a suit that protects us from shark bites, and now I've got one that attracts shark bites. Well, that didn't really turn out to be the case either, but there is some validity to that, to that equation, and that's part of the reason that I like shifting to other materials like titanium, because they give off the same electric signature that the steel does in water, and of course why I've been shifting for other industry sectors toward non-metallic solutions and so on, just for a little fun. So you see the stainless, that's traditional. Titanium looks a lot like the stainless, but it's half the weight, but generally about 3 times the cost. Another massive breakthrough that I made in fairly recent years was shifting and going over to blackmail. So you see this one virtually disappears, the one on my right hand here. This one is all bright and shiny. If you've seen any films when I'm in the water working, or anybody else in the water working with sharks, and you see us feeding sharks, you'll notice that piece of fish in our hand looks a lot like this shiny silvery material because it's fish scales and or light colored flesh. And this one, if your gloves are black and you've got a shiny object in there like this bit of fish, there's less likelihood the shark will confuse your hand as it's going for that bit of bait. So going to blackmail, which is what I call this, it's one of our more advanced improvements to shark suits, helps in a variety of ways. Makes you less visible, less of a target, and of course they basically disappear, as you're wearing them underwater. So then you go from there and you shift over to all the natural suits that we've been using forever. So here you got some neoprene, right? This is our wetsuits. This is what we would normally use. Obviously, there's nothing protective about neoprene. It just slices and dices, right? Or if you've got a blade of some kind, you can simply, cut it or slice it right up. Well, my textiles, if we make our neoprene, which we're in the process of doing now, out of my textiles, by replacing the nylon that's on the skin right there, let's see what happens now. Not a thing. So you see what happened to that neoprene underneath there, right? It's all jaggedy and cut up right there. Can you see that? And then there's your textile. You also with the blade, example, boom, you're all the way through. Here you got some textile.
Whoa, that's amazing.
The things that we do for fun around here are changing the freaking world. And I couldn't be more excited about it and the progress that we've made. There are many, many different kinds of products that I've made for my friends in the special operations and so on that have already been protecting their lives, limbs, survivability. We like to think of ourselves as being able to extend the zone of survivability while shrinking the zone of lethality. And that's precisely what the whole shark adventure has evolved into through a lot of this protective technology. So it goes from sharks and the great outdoor world and has now been shifting over into some of these other more commercially viable areas that would bring greater value to normal people as opposed to this tiny little niche of working with sharks.
So you're making wetsuits from this textile? Is that what you're making out of those? Yeah.
Yeah, I've designed, been about 30 plus textiles now over the past, say, 10 years, maybe 20 years. Some of the original ones were for shark suits that I was building, that direction. And I've actually made shark suits out of some of the textiles that I developed early on. And those did their job. I learned many, many things about that. Sharks' teeth are as sharp as things can get. So they are extremely sharp. You just touch shark's teeth, whether it's a large white shark style or something smaller. Excuse me, anything that has serrated teeth like this, whether it's white shark or in this case a bull shark. You've heard about bull sharks and being how notorious and fierce they can be. Well, that's absolutely true because they've got a very high testosterone level. They're kind of like they're sort of like the pit bull of the reef sharks.
Yeah.
And while a white shark has this massive tooth, obviously he lives on larger animals. He needs more protein to sustain himself and the fat and so on. But sharks, since the megalodon days, I'm sure you guys remember hearing about the big, all that stuff. The megalodon days, the creature, their prey was even bigger. Well, as all the dinosaurs started going away and things started shrinking down to be more sustainable and survivable on Earth, way before we got here, the shark started shrinking down as well. And then every different species started looking for its niche in which to survive. So you had the white sharks with these giant teeth that were injuring large marine mammals, causing them to bleed out. They don't just come in and gobble them up like Hollywood would have you believe. They come in and they'll usually do an ambush strike. They'll hit them, allow the animal to die, quietly and just bleed out. Then they come in and they feed on it, taking it apart, or they'll find a dead whale or something. Bull sharks, on the other hand, are a whole different deal. Bull sharks tend to be the species that causes the most mayhem. When you hear about wicked, brutal shark bites incidents in any part of the world, because they live virtually everywhere, in the mid range there, they're not cold water sharks. But these guys, with all that additional power, the fact that they're the sole species that has the ability to convert its environment into brackish and fresh water to some extent, right? So the Lake Nicaragua shark would have been part of that the bull shark thing from way back at some point when they managed to get into the Lake Nicaragua and they managed to survive there. Also, we have bull sharks way up our rivers, like the Mississippi River and in Australia, all over the place. I don't know what the closest up in your neck of the woods would be, but I don't think anywhere in Europe you have bull sharks, do you?
Not that I'm aware of either. No, I think it tends to be probably south of the Bay of Biscay, heading down towards the Canaries, maybe heading down through there, towards Africa, I would guess. But certainly not that we're aware of that we've got them. You're going to freak Chris out because he hates swimming in the ocean already. And if you mention there's bull sharks in Scotland, he's never going back in the water.
It's either that or Nessie, right?
Well, it's funny you say that, Jeremiah, because I was thinking to myself, I could go swimming in Loch Ness now with one of your suits on and not be worried about Nessie.
I don't think Nessie wants to gobble you up, though. I think she'd probably be stoked just to see you swimming around. If you found her, she'd be happy to see you, I'm sure. I'm going to guess that she's pretty lonely for a while.
Yeah, I would think so.
Well, these bull sharks, though, they while you've got that big scary shark, the white shark, And makos can have teeth this long as well. Tiger sharks aren't this long. Tiger sharks could be about half that high, but as big as this. But the bull shark doesn't need big teeth because they have these perfectly evolved tools, whether it's white shark or bull shark. Bull shark has the biggest attitude and one of the more notorious reputations, but look at the size of these freaking teeth. They're tiny, tiny in comparison to the size and power of the animal. Why? Attitude. They don't need big teeth. These guys have perfectly evolved tools, and when you add the aggressive behavior that they're and the power that they're capable of, they just get in and they start doing damage. And this is the species that usually takes off arms, limbs, consumes whole bodies, or whatever they're managing to catch. Extremely powerful, extremely capable. But you can also, that being said, swim with 50, 60 of them in different parts of the world at different time of year, at different times of the year. So they're not all aggressive. They're just capable. It's like it's like a Chihuahua. If a Chihuahua was bigger, there'd be a lot fewer people walking around because they'd probably be eating a lot more of us, right? With their little attitude. But I think all species are just extraordinary. They've built critical niches for themselves in the ecosystems in which they play a vital part for the health, well-being, and sustainability of the ocean, which is what sustains us as our own species here on Earth.
Yeah.
Just when you're touching on white sharks there, Jeremiah, I don't know which part of this is, and again, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you were the first man to have an open water swim with the great white, but certainly the first man to hitch a ride on a great white.
Yeah, there were some people that have encountered them.
Right.
Well, you'll understand why in a minute here when I tell you that story. But for the most part, white sharks have swum in, and divers have seen them at different places, for years. But nobody was even thinking about interacting with them under normal circumstances. Ron and Val, old friends, that's part of how we got so close. They shot the real shark sequences for the original Jaws. And before the film came out, that was back in the years that we were all close and hanging out. And they told me the story of the film, and I'm like, oh, well, that's gonna be interesting. When I went to see it, even knowing the whole story, and the 90% of it was the mechanical shark, it still scared the shit out of me when everybody jumped and screamed in the theater, because it's pretty freaking intimidating, when that stuff goes down. And that opening scene where that girl is skinny dipping in the water there, that opening scene, in my view, and mind you, studying all those shark incidents that have been recorded was part of my specialty. I studied all that when I was younger. And of course, I've been subject to thousands of bites by many different species all over the planet as I've been testing my gear through the years, over the past 40 years. And that was the most accurate visual portrayal I can imagine of somebody getting hung up with a shark like that, without expecting anything. And I mean, just the way it hit her, the way her behavior went down, her disbelief that what's going on here, the movement. I mean, it was unearthly to me. It really rocked me. And to this day, that still becomes the most accurate portrayal I've seen of that kind of a unexpected encounter.
She apparently broke 3 ribs filming the scene because of the way the stuntmen were pulling her through the water where she's screaming. It was because her ribs, so I've read, again, you believe 90% of what you read on the internet, but apparently it was well documented that she was injured at one point during the scene.
Probably. It's not easy to pull a body through water, as you know. It's it's like you're stuck in freaking concrete. It's being in the water is a whole nother game. It's both when I'm working with the animals and not. And, your life gets complicated down there. And once I started wearing the big beard again, it's very difficult to wear a mask, when you got a beard. Well, unfortunately, some of the more recent National Geographic programs I've done, the people that did them like that big beard. But it made it very, very sketchy for me not to have my mask fly off, when I'm getting beat up in the water, because the beard just makes it slide off. I figured it out. I always figure out a way to do them, but it was a bit of another bit of a challenge there.
You were talking about the hitching a ride on a shark.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so the white shark deal. Yeah, that was in the mid '80s, I believe, long before any of the things that you see out there now that have become popular with the development of the shark diving industry. And we were film. I used to do a lot of Wild Kingdom. Remember that program?
I remember,
I was Wild Kingdom. Yeah, I did a bunch of the shark shows back in the '80s, '80s, probably '90s. I can't remember when all that wound down, but we were in Australia working on doing a white shark film for Wild Kingdom, testing some of my new materials for shark suits. After we got the film completed, there were still sharks around. And back then, we used to have to work really hard in order to find these animals. Nowadays, you go to South Africa, you jump on a boat and guns by. It's like putting a quarter in a parking meter. They run you offshore for 20 minutes. You look at a white shark swimming around, you go back in and get on your plane and go wherever you're going next. It's unbelievable. It's like these super predators that were so difficult for us to even locate back in those days are now far easier to find because everybody's tuned in their capabilities of locating these animals and where they're living and so on, the techniques. And it's a whole different game. But back then, we were all surprised and delighted that we still had 3 or 4 sharks hanging around after we finished the film. We didn't have to necessarily go that quickly. We'd stay another day. We all jump in the water that afternoon to go down and just start taking some pictures. Put 2 cages down on the bottom. I was there with Rodney Fox, my buddy, he's a famous Australian guy, largely because he runs trips down there now, but originally because he was bitten. His entire torso was in the mouth of a great white shark that, like from his armpit down to his hip bones, there was a giant semicircle that nearly killed him. His wetsuit kept him together and he survived, but he survived really one of the most notorious of those kinds of bites during a spearfishing competition when he was a young guy in Australia. And I was down there with Rodney on his boat that we used to use when working with white sharks there. And these sharks were hanging around. The bottom was about 60 feet. Visibility was good, maybe 40, 50 feet, something like that. On the bottom of this area, the Neptune Islands down there out of South Australia, it's low rock with low seaweed, kind of kelpy seaweed over it, not the tall stuff. So we're at about 60 feet. We have 2 cages down. They're maybe 40 feet apart, 30, 40 feet apart. You could see the other one, but it was starting to drop off in its visibility over there. Well, I'm in the cage with, I guess, 2 or 3 guys. Everybody's got their cage in one of these cages down there. I'm in the back. They're up there with their cameras at the front door, holding their cameras, waiting for the shark to swim by the front of the cage so they can take a picture. Well, I kept watching this one big white shark, this big one, 17 plus feet, according to everybody that was there. And it kept swimming this big pattern, like a big figure 8, around the other cage, and it would come back, and it would come around ours, just like a big figure 8. And I'm watching, and it just seems so chill and so mellow. Now, mind you, all of these sharks that we were feeding earlier were coming around the cage, almost chasing us because we were, as we were doing our film, because we had a lot of bait in the water at that time. On the bottom down here, we didn't have bait in the water. We just put the cages down there. And I kept watching this big gal come by, swimming. And eventually, we had a big back door on this cage that I very quietly opened, without the guys in the front even realizing that what I was doing. They were focused on, hey man, where'd that shark go? You're looking out in the distance hoping to see it, right? I'm sitting there and here comes the shark again. Now I open the cage door. This is multiple passes, time after time. It would take about 3-4 minutes per pass, maybe 5 minutes when it would come back around. I open that door and I step outside of it. And the shark's only about 15, 20 feet away as he's passing around the side. And this white shark is so big that it would take 3 sets of my arms to go around its torso, stretched out, like fully stretched out. Its pectoral fins were so long, they seemed like they were small airplane wings. This is a big, it's like a submarine coming by. And as this animal's coming by, I'm just getting, I'm first at the edge of the cage there, standing behind it. The next pass, I'm about halfway out to it. The next pass, I'm out a little further. And throughout this time, I'm doing, constant observation and trying to understand what's attracting this fish's attention and what disturbs him, annoys him, and so on. I just kept watching its eye, and it just seemed mellow. It seemed chill. And it wasn't planned. There was nothing, in my mind that I wanted to go around and play around like this. But I did have a bit of a bone to pick with the notion that if you're out in open water with white sharks, you're a goner. And that had been proposed by a variety of so-called shark authorities or experts. You know what an expert is, right? X is a has-been and spurt is a drip under pressure. Well, I'm not a big fan of that kind of expertise. I'm more in tune with the reality of what's going on, right? And that can change at any second, as everybody knows. And I didn't like the fact that they were suggesting that they were some kind of hero, for stepping out of the cage with a long stick to protect themselves, as though they were doing something extraordinary. It put a bad light on sharks, suggesting that they would gobble you up if you were in the water. And so I did have an interest in understanding more about the range of behavior from even these massive predators that had been ignored 100% up to this point. Nobody was even considering friendly encounters with great white sharks. As that shark got closer and closer, eventually I just extended my arm out as it passed by, stretched it, because I had to leap over that pectoral fin, like this, while my hand was brushing down the side of this animal. Just swam on by, and it was like a wall moving past my hand as it rolled on past, right? Well, I watched that time and time again. Then eventually it came by, and I just couldn't. It was an automatic response. I just kind of looped my hand around as my hand went down the side. I just looped my hand around the tail as it swung by, and it took a bit of time, right? Because the nose is way here, and finally the tail shows up, and I just kind of hooked it on there. I didn't grab it. I didn't do anything aggressive or assertive like that. I just kind of looped on, remember I don't know if in Scotland you used to have those little streamers on our bicycle handlebars when we were a little kid. That's probably beyond, much before your day, but we used to have these little trailer things, right? And that's what I felt like. I was like a streamer on the tail of this big animal, and I was just kind of blowing in the breeze. And there's a photograph that you can probably find someplace out there of me doing that. The shark in that photograph is swimming away, and it was shot with a wide-angle lens, so it changes the perspective a bit. But look at the size of my hand on that tail, the upper lobe of the tail, and you'll realize that my hand is tiny in comparison to that size of that fish. Well, after that first little ride there, I hung on, and I just didn't let go for a little while. And he started taking off. The shark kind of leaned its head, looked back my direction, just without even flinching. There was nothing assertive, no twitch or anything like that. It just kept going, and I stayed on, and it just started swimming. And when a white shark swims, it's covering ground, because that tail is so powerful that it moves them very quickly. This big shark, before I knew it, I was probably, starting to lose visibility of the cages when I looked back. And I thought, well, I don't know if I want to be out here and then get lost and not know how the hell to get back to the cage, because you do not want to swim up through the water column back to a boat in white shark area. That was completely insane at that point. An insane notion, because that's where they hunt. And, I dropped off eventually after that first ride, as I started losing visibility of the cages. And I thought, all right, I better get back there. And I started swimming across the bottom, and I glanced back the direction that I know the shark's going to return from based on the experience of watching this figure eight. Well, it didn't take as long for him to come back this time. I noticed it had cut the circle of the figure eight in half, and now it was coming straight back much sooner than I had anticipated, and covering more ground than I could even fantasize about covering, because I couldn't cover 3 feet in the time that shark could cover 30, by flipping furiously across the bottom of my fins. I thought, oh, geez, I might have miscalculated this a little bit. And son of a gun, if I don't see this shadow of a cylinder getting more and more distinct, and then you see that little half smile as that shark is swimming straight back at me. I try to kick a little faster. I realized there's no way I'm going to make it back to the cage. So I stopped, and I had a camera in one hand, a small Nikonis camera with a 15 and a strobe in the other hand. I stopped. I turned toward the shark, and I got as big as I could, spread my arms out. And my intention was when it came in to hit me, assuming that's what it was going to do, that I would try to roll off the top of its head to avoid the mouth. With sharks, really, it might sound funny, but it's fact. All you have to do is stay out of the mouth. So if you keep it cool, everything's going to be fine, and you just don't lose your shit and drown or something else happens to you. But if you just stay out of the mouth, whatever that takes, you're going to be just fine. And my plan was to roll over the top of them like a kid trying to jump over a Porsche, right? Well, the shark comes barreling in at me, stops about, I don't know, it seemed like it was only about 5 or 6 feet away from me. Boom, slows down, turns to its side a bit, looks at me with that eye, kind of goes, like he was saying, "Oh, sorry, Jeremiah, I didn't realize that was you." Swims on by. That was the first ride. I did that again, 5, 6 times that afternoon. By the end of that afternoon, there's another interesting part about this. Those guys in the cage, they saw that big shark come by again. And when the tail got to them, they saw Jeremiah hanging off the back of the shark because it was swimming away, right? And they're like, losing their shit, like, wait, whoa, no. What the hell is this, right? This is why there are so few photographs of that, because they're like, no, we don't want to shoot pictures of this stuff. This guy's already having too much fun. We're not going to make it even better for him, right? And in the end of the day, all of those guys in the cages, out of both cages, were out in open water, swimming around the bottom, sometimes looking into the murk for the shark. Meanwhile, there's a big shark right behind him, and I have photographs of all this, kind of gnashing his jaws, 5 feet behind this guy, and he's looking that direction. It's just ridiculous how many times these sharks could have done a lot of damage. They chose not to. We had 3 sharks swimming around us, including that big one, and then there was another huge shark that was off in the distance, if I recall. It was I think we had either 2 in close and went outside, or 3 in close and went outside. And the biggest one never even came in, because I would like to think that the older fish that survive the longest have developed some skills at survival. So they're not foolish. The young sharks, however, there was quite a young one there, maybe about a 9 or 10 footer. That one was really persnickety and would come in and kind of be a little bit aggressive and sniffing around, and he was the one I was watching, because they're like it's like punk kids in bars. You don't want to underestimate their ignorance or stupidity at getting in trouble. And the same applies to sharks. I've often told people that frankly that sharks are a lot like people. You walk into a strange bar in a funky part of town. When I walk in, I look around, I see who's there, I assess the situation, and I've got a pretty good awareness of what may go down in that space. It's just a survival tactic, situation. And you look around, you see one guy, and you go, "Oh, that guy looks all right. That guy, he looks a little sketch. I'm going to keep an eye on him. And that one over there, we should just kill that one first, because he's clearly, that got to be a problem." Humans are the same. Most people are in that first category. They're in the well-behaved, socialized side. Not everybody's a jerk or a dickhead and going to be a problem for you. But the ones that are, you don't ever want to be unprepared when you're out there underwater and there's multiple sharks around you, and then you haven't been paying attention to the dickhead. That's another fool's errand that I may have made a few times, but fortunately I never suffered any negative consequences as a
result. That's one of the coolest stories I've ever heard.
It totally is. It's even better. Hearing it from the man that did it as well is beyond cool.
It also helps. You're a very good storyteller. You're a very good storyteller.
I'm trying not to cuss too much here. You see, a lot of these younger military folks, every word it comes out of their mouth is usually got 4 letters in it. So
yeah, no, that's fine. It's one of those things where, had there not been a picture taken and somebody told you that story, you'd be like, "No, you didn't. You hitched a that." It's one of those things where if there wasn't a picture taken and somebody told you that story, you'd be like, "I don't think you did." But there's photo evidence, and that's incredible. Really, really, really amazing.
Well, it's I mean, it's extraordinary to have had the opportunity to be involved in so many of these formative aspects of certainly the diving industry and the development of the global shark diving industry and the education and conservation aspect of this. You know, to your point earlier, Alistair, about misunderstanding or not having a complete picture of the development and evolution of shark suits over these 40 years. One of the interesting things that used to get in my craw, because when I was having communication issues with my old partners back there, the tailors were involved for about a year and a half max, and when we weren't communicating well about that and things were getting confusing about where the shark suits came from and all that, I used to simply ask people, because I was traveling around the world constantly back then, and I was in New Zealand. I was up in Mount Cook, up at a little hotel up there called the Hermitage. Beautiful, extraordinary environmental place. And later that evening, I was at a bar up on the top of the hill there, and there were a lot of backpackers and different people roaming around. And whenever I would encounter Australians or people from the Pacific anywhere, I would say, hey, without revealing my involvement, I would say, yeah, are you familiar with that whole shark thing, some kind of suit that people wear and they don't get hurt when they're bitten by sharks, you know? And I would just ask them, you know, what they know about that or what they've heard about it. And I asked an Aussie kid up there in the bar one night. It was pretty raucous already, but I asked this fellow if he'd heard anything about it, and he says, "Oh yeah, we know about shark suits. Yeah, Ron and Val Taylor, they've been claiming that it's their product, but we understand there's a young marine biologist in California that's actually done all that work." I asked him to repeat what he said, and I thought, dear sweet Jesus, the word is finally out, and you know that old myth is kind of dissolving. So of course the next words out of my mouth were, "Bartender, open bar for the rest of the evening, please." And we all, you know, proceeded to get completely and thoroughly pissed. I couldn't have been happier and more proud. I'm not sure I even told them my involvement with the suits at that point. I was just so delighted to know that I wasn't having to correct some confusion, that it was already out there. You know?
Yeah, it's even cooler that the correct information got out, you know, way before the internet was ever a thing as well. Because nowadays, you know, it takes 2 seconds to Google, boom, you've got all the information there. But back then, it was very much, you know, word of mouth. And once something was out there, it was very difficult for it not to be the case, because, you know, you repeat anything often enough, it becomes, inverted commas, the truth. And as I said, I've grown up, because I remember seeing the footage of the suits in documentaries, and I remember my dad talking about it because he knew a lot of the Royal Navy divers, and they were obviously talking about it. And as I said, for years and years, I was convinced. And then, obviously, in the last year and a half or so, when I found out a bit more, I was like, I can't believe it. It's crazy that all that time. But it's great that it happened back then, even pre-internet, that people knew the truth. That, you know, it was from yourself.
You know, it's remarkable how the notoriety of that whole thing, if you want to call it that. But it is freaking global. I mean, the information, if there was media attached to it, it was global. By now, I think I've done maybe about 100 film and media projects through the years. Number one. Number two, my original company, I had a different name. It was called Neptunic. And in 2010 or 11, I had to shoot that company in the face, because that was when I started to grow the business and started doing a lot of this non-marine science stuff, but the military development and all that, including, you know, ballistic concealable armor and just crazy, anywhere and everywhere you could think of was an aggressive environment. That's the kind of things I was getting involved in. So as the company was growing, you've got to bring in more so-called professional business people. And oh man, I assumed that everybody was like me and they could handle it and figure it out. But within 2 years, I ran it as a one-man company for 35 years. And within 2 years, the professional business people had it so chewed up that I had to kill it and then rebrand all my marine science separately. So I do the marine science under Shark Armor. I do the technical developments under Silvergate Tech, which is one of my other companies. And then as JeremiahSullivan.com, I do all kinds of unique design and, you know, technical solutions for other people. But It's been more of a lesson, frankly, understanding the business surviving side, of kind of evolving into something of significance like that. Though the science was certainly more interesting to me than having to engage with so many of these business clowns, man. That's not my game, man. I don't care for people like that corporate mentality and so on. They're a bunch of parasites in my view. And so we ended up shutting my old company down, sold off the old logo. Some people bought that and are trying to sell T-shirts, claiming to be involved in sharks and whatnot, some of my history, but they're not. Anything and everything to do with shark suits is strictly, completely, 100% rebranded to Shark Armor now.
Nice. It's ironic when you're telling that story that, people like that in business would probably be known as sharks, when in fact they're just assholes, and the sharks are the actual, the sharks are the good guys in this story.
Man, I could tell you stories about these silver-tongued little silver sideburn dipshits with starched shirts and suits coming in and trying to be all freaking uppity with me, and I'm like, get the fuck out of here, man. It's not going to work. You know what I mean? It's just that's not my style. So it does take a different kind of person to deal with all that business. And I've at last, after a couple of attempts, found the right people to handle, trustworthy people that can handle that piece of my work. So it allows me to focus on development and innovation and doing the kind of things that I'm best at.
Yeah, I mean, like everything, with your shark suit itself, in terms of business, it's there's a lot of trial and error. It takes time to find the right people for the right positions, and but thankfully you got it sorted out now, and it's becoming, like you're saying, it's everybody knows about the shark armor, and it's really cool. I'm really fascinated with the textile for the wetsuit. That's amazing to me. I'm sitting thinking about that. My little pea brain sitting thinking about that now.
Yeah. So I make them. I make lycra style. I make like a denim style. I do them in all kinds of different, depending on what the government needed from me, what problem they were trying to solve. I would engineer a yarn, then I would develop a textile, then I would make a textile, then I would either make single layer textiles or laminates or composites, or everything from frag to laceration, abrasion, penetration, all that sort of thing. Things that normally chew up textiles and all that those days are over. It doesn't have to be that way anymore. You don't have to go through 5 pairs of gloves per cycle if you're a SEAL. Per training cycle, you go through one and you keep it for 10 years or longer. That's the date at this point for the gloves that I've been making for these guys through the years. Interestingly, it was back in about 1980 also when I first realized that there was some connection or an interest from the military and special operations. I was down here on Coronado Island, which is where SEAL base is here in San Diego. And because of all my personal friends and connections there, I was down there one day in one of the areas, where they keep all their gear, and there was a cork board there. And on that cork board was a little article that had been in a newspaper. It was one of the very first articles in a newspaper about my suits, the shark suits. And I'm going, well, son of a bitch, I wonder why these guys would have an interest in the shark suits, And then I started thinking about it, and of course it made sense. But I didn't build a shark suit that would be useful for them until it got to the titanium. And then, of course, the textiles are what are most interesting to all of those other non-marine science things. I mean, I have people calling from Africa, from India, Sri Lanka. Hey, we need something to protect our rangers from the bites from the predator cats, leopards or tigers or whatever it happens to be, and that sort of thing. So we build, people that are working with animals and all kinds of protective gear. Nothing can be used offensively. It's all strictly protective technologies.
Here's a question for you then, Jeremiah. Do you have any of the textiles that would be completely waterproof and keep you warm? It's just this is a completely off topic, but so I do quite a lot of climbing mountains in Scotland, and they are often bloody awful and wet and miserable. And you cannot find a pair of waterproof socks or gloves that are actually waterproof. I have never found one yet. So that's something that'd be quite interesting.
There's specifically on those socks. I can't remember the name of it, but I have come across that. I find it around my military things, and there is a company. What the heck was the name of that? Otter socks? Otter maybe? There was one that I've seen in recent years that claimed to be the waterproof sock because the guys are running around in all that same mess. God, I'd stunned if there wasn't something out there. Now I will dig into it and I will look around and I'll see what comes up and I'll pass that information forward to you.
Yeah, that'd be cool because I genuinely in Scotland, a lot of the hills have it's kind of heather and it holds a lot of water.
Yeah.
So when you're running hills or whatever, you just get in. There seems to be even real expensive gloves and socks. They're just not waterproof, and it's really annoying because if you're doing a lot of hills and you're out there for a while, your feet get wet, you're done. So it'd be cool if there was something.
Yeah. No, that does make a lot of sense, and if it's still an issue, that's something that I'll put in the back of my bonnet to give a little thought to. If I can't find anything out there, then by God, I'll make something. How about that?
Yeah, that'd be cool. It'd be cool. It'd be popular in Scotland anyway.
So you'd be what they call a Highlander.
No.
But there's two of you. How could there only be one if there's two of you here?
Ali's from the islands originally. Ali's from the islands. But yeah, they're the true Highlanders are a different breed altogether. They're a very unique people, tough, real tough people. We're down in the lowlands, but I love spending time up there. If you ever get a chance to come to Scotland, the north of Scotland is some of the hills is absolutely incredible. Not quite the weather that you have in San Diego, but it's it's different. It's a different challenge.
It wouldn't be as green if we didn't have the weather.
It wouldn't be as green.
Yeah. Well, I like all that crazy weather. I mean, that's part of the beauty of being able to travel back when everybody could travel still, and traveling around the planet and being in all these remote parts of the world, which are basically what I specialized in, truly remote areas. The polar regions, Greenland, and you name it, anywhere and everywhere, all over the planet. And seeing whether it's mountains, deserts, whatever, I love it all. I can always go back to the ocean, but then I really enjoy being out in these other situations, skiing and doing all the rest of that stuff out there as well.
Yeah.
So I have one Scottish joke, which you got to stop me if you've heard this before. But let me guess. It's the only one I know, so it's probably the oldest Scottish story there was, right? It was about the girl, the girl and young Ian sitting out in the. You have to tell me how to tell this joke correctly. That's what we'll use this time. So you got this guy and his girlfriend says, "Oh, Ian, I've always been curious. What do you got underneath that kilt?" And he said, "Aye, put your hand under there and you'll find out." She slides her hand in there and she pulls it out quickly and she says, "Aye, it's gruesome." And he says, "Aye, put it there again, it'll gruesome more."
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Have you ever heard that?
I have never heard that joke.
No.
My God.
Never heard that. I thought it was going to be one similar to that. The one that I had heard where I thought was going to go is, how can you tell what clan a Scotsman's from? If you put your hand up his kilt and it's a quarter pounder, he's a McDonald.
You don't.
I've never heard that either, Ali. I have never heard that. That's good. That's good. There we go.
Well,
Who knew?
Yeah, but it always made me laugh. So now you got a new one in your quiver.
Absolutely, I'm going to add that to the bank. That's a good one.
This is what we always say. You never know where these conversations end up. Who knew we'd be talking Scottish jokes?
That's it, man.
Yep. This has been absolutely fantastic, Jeremiah. I've had a great time listening, learning. It's been a real pleasure. I think we could probably do this again at some point if you'd like to do that. That'd be really
sure.
Cool.
I'm always down for a good chat with the lads.
Yeah, it's awesome.
We've just hit 90 minutes. This 90 minutes has flown by.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I apologize for running my mouth off so much, but
my plan was to leave about 20 minutes ago. So there's a really nice night, so I was going to go watch sunset. But about 15 minutes into this conversation, I kind of went, fuck that. The sun will set tomorrow again. This is cool.
Yeah.
So I forgot about that.
It's beer o'clock over there for you. It's 3 o'clock for you. I'll show you one more thing here before.
Absolutely.
Before we go, I don't know if you'll be able to see this. I'll try to position this so that you see Can you see the damage on this?
Yeah.
Okay. These are white sharks chewing on this bit of neoprene right here. This bit of neoprene covered some of the test parts that I had made out of my materials. So you see this much damage on this bit of neoprene. This is obviously you'd have been butchered had you been inside there. My textiles, which were inside this, wrapped around something replicating an armor of my leg in density and hardness and all that. No damage.
So that's amazing.
No damage. Conversely, with the chainmail, which was never designed for white sharks, chainmail was designed for sharks. Usually, back in the day when I first started them, they were the sharks that were responsible for most bites on humans. So those would have been sharks generally about 8 or 9 feet and smaller, less than 50 feet from shore. That's where most shark bites had occurred. And I'm not using the term attacks. Shark bites are incidental for the most part. Very rarely is someone with a shark actually trying to get you. It's normally an accident because of water visibility and so on, or being in the wrong place, wrong time. Shit, I lost the train of thought I had on that, where I was going with that one, but no matter. I'm just completely different, probably. But
it's okay. It happens to me all the time.
Whatever it happened to be.
No, it's super cool that as you said, that a white shark was gnawing on that material and inside because of your fabric, no damage to the human compound or whatever. That's incredible.
There's so many details. There's so many, I'm a detail guy, and there's so many details that you've got to pay attention to when you're assessing these kinds of threat and protective measures and so on. And it comes down not just to the material science of the substrate you're using, but it's the behavioral issues of both the creature and the prey, being as a diver. It's about the biomechanics that we're capable of withstanding without being destroyed, by being thrown around, dislocated, broken this, broken that, biting through something. The psychological issues that are there. So if you don't bring in the physical well-being and all these various layers and variables into every equation when trying to solve or create protective solutions in lethal environments, you're in a very perilous place, because if you don't take those things into account, you're just guessing, and it's not going to come out well. So it's all of those lessons from the early shark days that I've used to carry forward with all of these different developments, whether they be for action sports, the military, law enforcement, industrial safety, road sports, motorcycles, whatever it happens to be. They're all benefiting now from this long 40-year process of playing around with sharks and having fun with friends.
It's really a remarkable story, and it's genuinely fat. You know what it feels like? It feels like when there was a few topics when I was at school. Egypt was one, and I remember I had a really good history teacher, and I was just fascinated when he was telling something. It was like it completely captivated me. And I was, when you were telling some of these shark stories, I was just like, it felt like I was 15 again, and my history teacher was talking to me about Egypt. It was just completely like, oh, what happens next?
Oh man,
that's what I was like. So it's super cool.
The story continues.
Yeah,
Happy to continue.
We will definitely do this again at some point. I feel like there's a million things we could still get into.
Tonight, by the way, is the latest National Geographic program I've done, I think it's called Most Wanted Sharks. It's on National Geographic Channel in this country tonight, and then it will also run on the National Geographic Wild Network, which is their sister network. I think for the next couple of weeks you'll be able to see some of the programs.
That's cool.
Stuff I did last year with Tiger. Yeah, with Tiger Shark.
For that. That's really cool.
We'll be all over that.
Yeah, we will. That's cool. Right. Well, I have to go and do some stuff now. Jeremiah, it's been an absolute pleasure. You're a gentleman and very, very interesting man. So thank you for your time.
Well, I'll take the second compliment, but the first one certainly wouldn't apply to me. Talking to you guys.
Just before we jump out, Jeremiah, I know you've mentioned a few times as we've gone through, but we'd like to put this in the notes. If people want to find out more about you, your work, where can they find you on the internet or social media? And we'll add this all into the notes.
Do you want me to send it over to you? I'll send
if you say it now, and I'll add it into the chat.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah. Shark Armor, which is the marine side of what I do. It's the URL for that is Shark Suits, plural, one word, Shark Suits, SharkSuits.com. The technical products that I make for serious, lethal issues, non-diving, is Silvergate Tech, TEK, SILVERGATETEK.com. And then my overall general site is jeremiahsullivan.com. Then on Instagram, it's Sharkbait, SHRKBA and the number 8. There's no A in the shark there, so it's SHRKBA and the number 8. If you look at those things, you'll be able to track me pretty closely, and feel free to reach out. Anybody that's got an issue that I might be able to help them with, and happy to do it.
Awesome.
We'll add that into the notes, and I'll tag it into the video as well, as you're actually seeing it for everyone that's watching on YouTube. But again, Jeremiah Sullivan, thank you very much for giving up 95 minutes of your time. It's absolutely flown by. Again, we'll definitely, if you're available at any point, we'll definitely jump back in, and to be continued is definitely the way forward. But again, Jeremiah, thank you very much for your time.
Cheers, mate. I appreciate very much your interest. Thanks so much, guys.
No problem.
Thank you.
Cheers.
31 done and dusted.
The Silly Goose Gang Podcast.